she saved Billionaire's son from fire. What he suggested as payment stunned her. A woman rushes into a burning mansion in the middle of a thunderstorm, risking her own life to save a billionaire's little boy trapped upstairs. She doesn't think twice. Smoke, flames, and falling beams, she carries the child out moments before the roof collapses. Days later, as she wakes in the hospital, the man whose son she saved walks in. But instead of money, he makes her an offer that stops her cold. He doesn't want to pay her. He wants her to move into his home. At first it sounds like gratitude, but behind those mansion gates lies something deeper. Grief, guilt, and a secret that's never been spoken aloud. Why does this man, who's lost everything, want her close? And when the truth about the fire and his past comes out, will it heal them both or destroy what little faith they have left? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Rain beat down on the windshield like 1,000 tiny fists. The wipers of Tasha Reynolds' old blue sedan squeaked with each swipe, fighting to keep up with the storm. The road was slick, glistening under the dull glow of her headlights as she drove home from another long night shift at Silverbrook County Hospital. It was almost midnight, and the world outside was empty except for the wind. Tasha's eyes burned from exhaustion, but she pressed on, her heart set on reaching home, where her 6-year-old nephew, Eli, would be fast asleep under his Spider-Man blanket. The thought made her smile, softly, tiredly. She hummed under her breath, a hymn her grandmother used to sing, the kind that made even the darkest nights feel safe. But then something caught her eye, a strange orange flicker through the sheets of rain. She blinked. At first she thought it was lightning. Then, as her car rounded a bend, she saw it clearly. Flames. A house, no, a mansion, was on fire. The 2-story estate stood behind a wrought-iron gate, flames bursting through its windows, smoke curling up into the black sky like a serpent. Tasha's heart jumped to her throat. "Oh, Lord," she whispered. She slammed the car into park right there on the road and leapt out, rain soaking through her scrubs in seconds. Her shoes slapped against the asphalt as she sprinted towards the gate. "Help!" A faint voice screamed from somewhere inside. "Somebody, help!" Without thinking, Tasha grabbed the metal gate. It was cold and slick under her palms. She pushed through a side entrance that had been left ajar and dashed across the sprawling yard, the fire's light turning the night into a terrifying orange dawn. Inside the house, smoke was thick and blinding. Heat roared against her skin like an open furnace. "Hello," she shouted, coughing hard. "Where are you?" "Upstairs," came a small voice, weak, frightened, definitely a child's. Her heart clenched. She pulled her shirt up over her mouth and began to climb. The wood creaked under her feet, every step feeling like a gamble. She turned a corner and found a boy, 8 years old, maybe, curled under a blanket, crying, his small hands clutching a stuffed bear. Flames danced down the hallway toward him. "It's okay, baby," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "I got you." She knelt, wrapped the blanket tighter around him, and lifted him into her arms. The boy clung to her neck, coughing. "It's too hot," he cried. "I know. Hold on tight, sweetheart." The stairs behind her groaned, then gave way with a cracks. She turned down another hall, searching for another way out. Every window was glowing red, every door swallowed by flame. She found a side room, a nursery of some kind, with a wide window leading to the front porch roof. She grabbed a chair, smashed the glass, and climbed out, careful to keep the boy close. Below them, rain poured like salvation. "Close your eyes, honey." And she jumped. They landed hard on the wet grass, Tasha's knee twisting beneath her. Pain shot up her leg, but she held the boy tight. She rolled onto her back, chest heaving, as firefighters arrived, sirens wailing, red lights flashing through the storm. One of them rushed toward her. "Ma'am, are you okay?" "I'm fine," she gasped. "The boy, I'm okay," the boy whispered, his voice trembling. "You saved me." Her vision blurred with tears and exhaustion. The rain kept falling, washing the soot from her face as she clutched him tighter. Then she heard another voice, deeper, panicked, breaking through the chaos. "Luke!" A man ran across the lawn, soaking wet in his dress shirt and slacks, his eyes wild with fear. He dropped to his knees beside them. "Luke! Oh my God!" The boy stirred weakly and lifted his head. "Daddy?" The man's hands trembled as he touched his son's face, then looked at Tasha. You saved my boy." Tasha tried to answer, but the world tilted. Her head fell back into the wet grass, and everything went black. The next thing she knew, she was lying in a hospital bed. The sterile white ceiling swam above her. Her arm was wrapped in gauze, and there was an ache deep in her chest every time she breathed. A soft beeping sound pulsed beside her bed. "Hey there, sleepyhead," came a warm voice. She turned her head to see a nurse, Clarice Jones, her friend and co-worker, smiling down at her. "You scared us half to death. You were out cold for almost 2 days." Tasha blinked groggily. 2 days. "Yep." Clarice leaned against the bed rail, folding her arms. "They said you carried that boy out like a hero. Broke a window, jumped off a roof. Girl, you got half the county talking?" Tasha frowned. "Is he okay? The boy?" Clarice's face softened. "He's fine. Just a little smoke inhalation. His father's been here every day. I think he's outside now." "His father?" Before Clarice could answer, the door opened. A tall man stepped inside, his presence quiet but commanding. His dark hair was damp, his face pale from sleepless nights. There was something heavy about his expression, like he was carrying a mountain on his shoulders. He looked at Tasha for a long moment before speaking. "You're awake." Tasha tried to sit up, but pain shot through her ribs. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to." "Don't apologize," he said quickly, moving closer. His voice was deep, steady, but thick with emotion. "You saved my son. There's nothing you could ever say sorry for." She studied him, broad-shouldered, neatly dressed, but with eyes that looked like they hadn't known rest in years. He didn't look like the kind of man who smiled often. "The doctors say you'll make a full recovery," he said. "I'll be covering your bills and anything else you need." She blinked. "You don't have to do that." "Yes, I do." His jaw tightened. "You risked your life for my boy, for Luke." Tasha gave a tired smile. "I'd do it again. You don't need to pay me for that." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe respect. Most people wouldn't say that. "I'm not most people," she said softly. He looked down, almost smiling. "No, you're not." For a moment, silence filled the room, but it wasn't awkward. It felt peaceful. Then, from the hallway, a small voice called, "Daddy?" The man turned, and a little boy peeked around the doorway. Luke. His face was pale, his hair messy, but his eyes lit up when he saw her. "Hey, kiddo," Tasha said gently. He ran to her bedside and hugged her arm. "You came for me," he whispered, his small voice full of wonder. Her throat tightened. "Of course I did." The man watched, something shifting behind his eyes, something like gratitude, or maybe a memory of how love used to feel. Luke's small hand stayed wrapped around Tasha's, even when the nurse came in to adjust her IV. And as Tasha looked at the boy's tired but smiling face, she knew something deep in her heart. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of something much bigger. That night, after they left, Tasha stared at the ceiling and whispered a prayer of thanks for life, for protection, for the strength to keep going. She didn't know the man's name. She didn't know his story. But she knew one thing for sure. God had crossed their paths for a reason. Morning light slid across the hospital floor like gold paint. Tasha lay propped on a stack of pillows, a soft blanket tucked around her shoulders. Her chest still ached when she took a deep breath, but the tight grip in her lungs had eased. A nurse had told her the smoke would take a few days to clear from her system. She respected that. Bodies took time. Hearts did too. Eli sat by the window, swinging his small legs. He traced raindrops that clung to the glass, even though the storm had passed in the night. He wore his favorite red hoodie, the one with a tiny rip near the pocket. He had refused to leave Tasha, and after a quick talk with the floor nurse, they let him stay the night on a recliner. He had slept curled like a cat, one hand stretched toward the foot of her bed, as if to make sure she did not drift away. "Morning, Auntie," he said without turning. "The sun's out. It smells like grass." "It does," she said, smiling. "Fresh is good." He nodded. "Do you think the house is still on fire?" "No," she said. "Firefighters took care of it." He pressed his forehead to the glass. "Will the boy have a house to go back to?" Her chest tightened. "He'll have a place. His father will see to that." Eli turned, studying her face. "The man who came last night?" "Yes." "He looked like a statue." Eli scrunched his nose. "Like the soldier by the courthouse, except he was sad." Tasha thought of the man's eyes, how they held something heavy and old. "He loves his son," she said. Eli slid off the windowsill, padded to her bed, and took her hand. "So do you," he said. "You looked like a hero." "I looked like a wet mop," she teased. He grinned. "A brave mop." The door clicked, and Clarice stepped in carrying a small tray. "Breakfast for my favorite troublemaker," she said, setting it on the rolling table. "And also for you, Tasha." "Bless you," Tasha said. "What's the damage?" "Hospital eggs," Clarice said, "which I think they make from clouds, but there's real toast and jam, and some fruit that did not come out of a can." Eli climbed into the armchair, examining a cup of yogurt like it was a science experiment. "Do we know if the boy is okay?" he asked. Clarice's smile softened. "Luke, he's fine, baby. He woke up earlier. The doc said he just needs rest." Tasha picked up her tea. "Is his father still here?" Clarice's eyes flicked to the clock. "He's been pacing this hall since 6. He asked me to let him know the moment you woke up. He's intense, but in a polite way. Maybe don't make him wait," Tasha said. Clarice squeezed her shoulder and slipped into the hall. Eli scooted his chair closer to the bed, stealing a triangle of toast. "Are you going to meet him again?" "I think so." "What if he tries to give you money?" Eli's voice was small but serious. "Then I say thank you and no," she said, placing a hand on his hair. "We don't do brave things for money." He nodded, satisfied. "We do them because it's right." "That's right," she said. The door opened again. The man stepped in with a slow breath, as if he had made himself calm before entering. He carried a small bouquet in one hand, ivy and white lilies, and a coffee in the other. His shirt was pressed, but his eyes still looked like they had not slept. He set the flowers on the side table and offered the coffee with a careful hand. "I didn't know how you take it," he said. "I brought it black. There's cream." "Black is perfect," she said. He glanced at Eli. "Good morning." "Hi," Eli said, fearless. "I'm Eli. I'm 6, but I can read chapter books." "Impressive," the man said, a hint of a smile. "I'm Daniel." Tasha nodded. "Daniel," she repeated, as if pinning the name to his face in her mind. "I'm Tasha." "I know," he said gently. "I won't stay long. He swallowed, and the words seemed to scrape his throat. "Thank you is not enough. You ran into a burning house for my son." Her eyes warmed. "I heard him call. I work in emergencies. Running towards trouble is a thing I do." He stood very still, as if afraid to shift the air. "When I reached the lawn last night," he said, voice low, "I thought I was too late, and then I saw you, this woman in soaked scrubs, holding my child like he was your own. I don't know a word big enough for that." "You don't need one," she said. He exhaled and nodded. A beat passed. Then he glanced at the doorway and lifted his hand in a small signal. Luke appeared with a nurse. He looked less pale this morning, his blonde hair combed and his small hands wrapped around the worn neck of a stuffed bear. When he saw Tasha, he smiled so hard his cheeks shook. "You're awake," he said. "I am," she said. "How's your chest?" "Better," he said, taking careful steps to the side of the bed. "I had a mask and it smelled like a pool and it made me dizzy and then it made me not dizzy." "Oxygen," she said. "That helps." He nodded as if he had learned something important. "Thank you for coming for me," he whispered. "It was so hot. I thought it would never end." Her heart ached for him. She could see how fear still clung to his small shoulders like a wet blanket. "Heat ends," she said softly. "Light stays." He pressed his face to her blanket and hugged her arm with careful strength. Daniel watched them both, some set part of him loosening at the edges. After a minute, Luke climbed into the armchair by Eli. The two boys sized each other up with the quiet respect children use when deciding if they might be friends. Eli lifted his yogurt cup. "Want half?" "Okay," Luke said, surprised. "You like comics?" Eli asked. "Sometimes," Luke said. "I like space better." "I like space too," Eli said quickly. "Stars are like night sprinkles." Luke grinned. Daniel cleared his throat, bringing his gaze back to Tasha. "May I?" He gestured to the foot of the bed. "Please," she said. He sat, hands folded. When he spoke, his voice was even, but there was a tremor beneath the surface. "There are logistics I can handle. Insurance, bills, replacements. Those things I can do with a phone call." He stopped, searched for her eyes. "But none of it is enough. I don't want to insult you by offering payment. I understand you didn't do this for money, but I also don't want to pretend like gratitude is only a feeling and not an action." Tasha listened without moving. He wasn't bargaining. He was trying to be true. He went on. "My home is unlivable for now. We have a guest house on the property that's untouched. I hired a team to clean after the smoke. It has 2 bedrooms, a kitchen. It's quiet, safe. If you'll allow it. I want you and your nephew to move in for as long as you'd like. I also want to hire you as my son's live-in caretaker while he recovers. He trusts you. He sleeps when you sing." Tasha felt the room shift. Even her breath seemed to hold itself still. She looked toward the window. Sunshine smeared the sky like a soft peach. She thought of their apartment, the rent, the second job she had picked up at the clinic last month, the way Eli had grown out of his shoes before she could save for new ones. She also thought of pride, and of the clear line in her own heart that separated mercy from dependency. "That is very generous," she said, "but I can't accept." Daniel did not flinch. "May I ask why?" "Because it would feel like a debt I could never repay," she said, "and because I already have a job." "You saved my son's life," he said. "I will never be even with you. I also understand work. We can arrange schedules. I'm not asking you to be a servant. I'm asking for help. For him." Luke looked up at that, his eyes moving from his father to Tasha. Will you come to our house? He asked, small and straightforward. Tasha's throat tightened. Honey, she said, that's not a simple thing. He nodded, as if trying to be brave. Okay. Daniel's voice softened. You could tell me what a fair salary looks like. You could write the schedule. You could leave whenever you wish. I'd also like to cover Eli's school and tutoring if needed. He paused. It is not charity. I am a man who needs help, and I am asking a woman I respect to lead us through this. Silence expanded. The air monitor ticked time. Clarice slipped in and stood by the door, sensing something delicate. She looked at Tasha, then at Daniel, then at the boys huddled over a plastic spoon. Her face said, I know this moment. Tasha placed her cup down. I need to think, she said, and pray. Decisions made inside pain often turn crooked. Daniel inclined his head. Of course. I also need to ask some questions, she added. Practical ones. Ask anything. Is there a contract? She said. Clear roles, clear lines? Yes. Will you expect me to entertain your guests, host fundraisers, smile for cameras? No, he said firmly. If anything, I need fewer cameras. She nodded. Will I have my own time? Evenings with Eli? Church on Sundays? Yes, he said. I would actually like to go too. That surprised her. He didn't look like a church man. He looked like a city man who wore iron on the inside. But she also saw how grief had carved hard lines into him that faith might soften. I will think, she said again. He stood, not pushing. I'll send the address. If you change your mind or have more questions, call me. Or Clarice can call me. Or the hospital can. I will be nearby today if you need anything. Luke slid off the chair and came to Tasha's side, holding out his bear. Do you want to borrow him? He asked. He's brave at night. Tasha touched the bear's soft ear. You keep him, she said. But if I'm scared, I'll remember he's on duty at your house. Luke nodded solemnly. He is. Daniel guided Luke towards the door. He paused, his hand on the frame. Tasha, he said, I know you will decide what's right. Thank you for hearing me. Thank you for asking. They left. The room seemed bigger after they were gone, and also emptier, like the tide had pulled out and shown the shape of rocks below. Clarice walked to the bed and sat. That was some offer, she murmured. It was, Tasha said, rubbing her wrist where the IV tubing tugged. It sounded almost like trust. Sounded like a man who remembers how to hope, Clarice said, even if he doesn't know that's what he's doing. Tasha closed her eyes. I don't want to be bought. You can't be, Clarice said. You're not for sale, but you also don't have to turn down every bridge that gets laid across a flood. Tasha gave a small laugh. When did you get so wise? I have a fridge magnet, Clarice said dryly. It says, eat your greens, drink your water, let God do the rest. Solid theology. And I have one more magnet, Clarice added. It says, don't let pride die on the wrong hill. Tasha breathed out. I'll think. Do that. Clarice squeezed her hand and stood. You rest. I'll take Eli down to the cafeteria and see if we can find a chocolate milk that is not from 1982. Eli perked up. Chocolate milk? In this economy, Clarice said. We shall attempt. They left, and Tasha lay still. She watched the square of sun crawl across the floor, inch by slow inch. The beeping of the monitor was steady, like a metronome guiding a simple hymn. She thought of rent due in 2 weeks. She thought of the clinic where she picked up shifts after her hospital hours. She thought of the landlord who had mentioned last month that the building might be sold by summer, which meant new owners, new rules. She thought of Eli's worn sneakers and the way he tried not to limp when they rubbed his heel. Her eyes filled, and she let them. She did not worry about the tears. Tears were honest. Tears washed. She prayed, not with fancy words, but with the plain ones she knew by heart. Lord, make me wise, make me brave, protect the boy, lead my steps, show me the right door. The answer was not a voice. It was a quiet lifting inside her chest, like a small lantern being lit. By afternoon, she had walked a slow loop of the hallway with a respiratory therapist. The therapist taught her how to breathe deep without coughing, how to sip water in small drinks, and how to rest without sinking into stiffness. Eli returned with a chocolate milk moustache and a pocket full of cafeteria salt packets he was certain were pure treasure. He stacked them on the side table like tiny bricks and announced he would build a fort for the plastic fork. At 3, her attending doctor examined her lungs and signed the discharge for the next morning. No work for 1 week, he said. Small walks, no stairs if you can help it. She lives on the 2nd floor, Clarice said, reappearing. I'll take them slow, Tasha promised. At 4, a courier arrived with a simple envelope. There was no company logo, no heavy stationery. Inside lay a handwritten note and a key card. The note was neat, direct, and brief. Guest house is ready if you ever need to see it. No pressure. Code on the back. Dinner is at 7 if you and Eli want to visit. No crowd. No cameras. We will be quiet. Eli watched her trace the letters with her finger. Is that from the statue man? From Daniel, she said. Are we going? His voice held hope and caution both. She thought of saying no. She could protect her heart that way. But she also thought of Luke's small hands, steadying his bear's head, offering her comfort she did not need but loved anyway. We'll go for dinner, she said. We won't decide anything else tonight. Eli whooped and then stopped, glancing at her chest. Gently, she warned with a grin. Gently whoop, he corrected in a whisper, and then wiggled his fingers like fireworks set to silent mode. They left at 6, after Clarice insisted on driving them in her car. You're not getting behind any wheel, hero, she scolded kindly. Also, I do not trust that blue sedan of yours in daylight, much less after smoke. It's a classic, Tasha teased. It's a door with 4 wheels, Clarice said. Barely. They rode through town as the sky softened to a wide, open blue. The storm had washed the world clean. The church steeple caught the light. The diner's neon flickered to life over the word PI. A man in a brimmed hat hosed down the sidewalk in front of the hardware store, and a pair of teenagers shared earbuds on the curb, laughing at nothing and everything. The Prescott property sat at the edge of town, tucked behind brick pillars and an iron gate that stood open like arms. The driveway curved between old oaks, their branches laced overhead. Up ahead, the main house rose pale and grand. Its windows were boarded where the fire had bitten. Yellow, tape marked a scar near the east wing. The sight made Eli's small hand find Tasha's. It's okay, she said, squeezing back. The danger is gone. On the right, past a row of hydrangeas, sat the guest house. White trim, blue-grey siding, a small porch with 2 chairs and a basket of clean blankets folded on a cedar trunk. Light glowed through the windows in a way that made the building look like it inhaled rather than simply existed. Daniel stood in the yard wearing a navy sweater and jeans. Without the suit, he looked a little less like a statue and a little more like a man who might pick up a rake. Luke stood beside him in sneakers that flashed red when he hopped. Max, the golden retriever, lay at his feet, tail thumping slow and happy. When Tasha opened the car door, air that smelled of wet earth and wood smoke rushed in. Luke lifted a hand and then ran, stopping short at her knee as if remembering the doctor's order to be careful with her chest. Hi, he said, breathless. Hi, she said. Max rose and nosed Eli's wrist. Eli giggled and offered his palm. "Soft," he whispered. "Welcome," Daniel said, stepping forward. "Thank you for coming." "Thank you for inviting us," she said. "We won't stay late. You can stay as long as you like," he said, and then seemed to hear his own words. "For dinner," he added with a sheepish half-smile. "I didn't mean— I knew," she said, amused. He led them along a stone path to the guest-house door. He did not talk much as they walked. He did not fill the quiet with apologies or promises. He let the evening speak. The squeak of crickets, the hush of the wind through the oaks, the distant tap-tap of a hammer from the crew who were boarding a broken window before night. Inside, the guest-house smelled like lemon oil and clean linen. A small living room opened to a tidy kitchen. A quilt lay folded over the back of a couch. On the table, someone had set a vase with 3 daisies and a sprig of rosemary. It felt like a place built for breath. Daniel showed them the 2 bedrooms. One had pale green walls and a braided rug. The other had a window that looked towards the main house and a bookshelf already stocked with children's titles. Eli moved to the shelf as if pulled by a magnet. He ran his finger along the spines. "They have Charlotte's Web," he whispered. "Good book," Tasha said. "I only cried a little," Eli declared. Daniel leaned in the doorway. "We can change anything you don't like," he said. "Different blankets, different lamp. I realize it's a lot at once." "It's kind," she said. "Kind is never too much." They ate dinner in the main house kitchen, which had survived the fire with smoke stains and a cracked tile near the stove. Someone had taped a sheet of paper over the crack that read in neat block letters, "Do not step here." Luke had drawn a sad face beside it and written, "Tile is wounded but brave." Dinner was simple: chicken noodle soup, fresh bread from the bakery, sliced peaches, and tea. A woman in her 50s with clever eyes and a stern bun moved with quiet force around the stove. She introduced herself as Mrs. Hattie Monroe, the housekeeper. "I've been here since Daniel had more hair and fewer worries," she said, then softened when she turned to Tasha. "Thank you for saving our boy." "It was God," Tasha said. "He just used my feet." Hattie's eyes shone for a second. "Well," she said, "he chose fast feet." They ate while the light outside thinned to lavender. The boys sat side by side, a careful space between their elbows until the space closed on its own. Max stretched under the table, head on his paws, waiting for a crust that Eli slipped him when he thought no one looked. Hattie pretended not to see. Daniel saw and pretended not to, too. After bowls were cleared, Luke leaned toward Tasha. "Will you tuck me in?" he asked. "Just for tonight." Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it, caught between gratitude and the worry of asking too much. "Yes," Tasha said, "if your dad is okay with that." Daniel nodded. "I'm okay with that." They climbed the back stairs to a room that had been cleaned and made warm. The walls wore faint smoke smudges near the ceiling, but someone had set a small lamp with a soft shade on the dresser, and it cast a golden circle that made the smudges look like old clouds. Luke brushed his teeth, then climbed into bed with his bear. He stared at the ceiling. "If it rains, the fire can't come back tonight," he whispered. "No," Tasha said, sitting beside him. "It can't." "Can you sing the song again?" She began a gentle lullaby her grandmother had taught her. The melody was simple. The words were only 3 lines, repeated like small waves. "Day is done. Night is near. God is good. We will not fear." By the time she finished the 3rd repeat, his lashes rested on his cheeks. She stayed a minute longer, letting the room learn the shape of quiet. When she stepped into the hall, Daniel stood against the wall, hands in his pockets, eyes on the baseboard like it held news. He did not speak at first. She waited, giving him room to find the right words. "He trusts you," he said finally. "I trust him back," she said. They moved down the stairs together. The house whispered in the way old houses do, wood remembering where it wanted to settle. In the kitchen, Hattie had put the dishes to soak. She handed Tasha a container wrapped in foil. "Soup for tomorrow," she said, "and bread." "Thank you," Tasha said. On the porch, the air had cooled. The oaks rustled their leaves like old men telling jokes. Eli climbed onto the porch swing and pushed off with his toes. The swing creaked and glided like breathing. "I still can't say yes," Tasha said to Daniel, quiet and honest. "Not yet. I understand," he said. "Coming here tonight was enough." He took a breath. "If you do say yes, I will sign whatever you want me to sign. I don't want a loose, messy thing. I want to do this right, with respect." "Respect matters," she said. He looked at the dark sweep of the yard. A single light burned in the guesthouse window. "You should know," he said, voice lower. "I have not been good at asking for help. Not since—" he faltered. "Not since my wife died." "I'm sorry," she said. "I argued with her the day she died," he said, the words slow, like they had spent a long time stuck in his throat. "She drove angry. A truck swerved. They said it wasn't anyone's fault. That word didn't mean much to me." "Guilt talks loud," Tasha said. "Even when it's wrong." He nodded. "I've been quiet with Luke, too quiet. I tried to make a world he wouldn't have to feel in. It turns out children need to feel, to stay human." "They do," she said gently. "So do fathers." He drew in a breath of the night and let it out. "If you can't do this job," he said, looking at her at last, "I'll understand. But I will ask one more thing. Will you tell me if I am failing him? Even if you're far away? Even if I don't like what you say?" "Yes," she said. "I'll tell you the truth I see. Tenderly." "Thank you," he said. Hattie came to the doorway with Eli's sweatshirt. "Don't forget this, sugar," she said. "Nights are still tricky." Eli slid off the swing. "Can Max visit sometimes?" he asked. "Max?" Daniel called softly. The dog padded over and leaned against Eli's legs as if to say, "I am already visiting." Daniel smiled. "He'll find you even when you don't invite him." Tasha laughed. The laugh felt good in her chest, like air warmed by tea. They said their goodnights. Hattie hugged Tasha in that gentle southern way that held history and welcome at the same time. Daniel walked them to the car and waited while Tasha settled herself and Eli buckled in. He lifted a hand as Clarice pulled away, and the gesture looked, for the first time, natural on him. On the ride back to the hospital, Eli leaned his head against Tasha's shoulder. "I like them," he murmured. "Me too," she said. "Are we going to live there?" "We are going to pray and think," she said, "and we are going to sleep." "Okay." He yawned. "I hope the guest house smells like lemons tomorrow." "It probably will." They reached the hospital before 9. Clarice hugged them both at the curb. "Text me if you need anything," she said. "And by anything, I mean anything except tax advice." "Noted," Tasha said. Upstairs, the floor was quieter. Night shift had clocked in. Voices were softer. Carts rolled like whispers. In her room, Tasha helped Eli into the recliner and tucked him in with the hospital blanket. He was asleep before she finished smoothing the hem. She brushed her teeth. At the small sink, her reflection pale and steady. When she lay back, the same square of light that had walked the floor that morning now sat on the wall like a shy visitor. She let her eyes rest on it until her body eased. "Lord," she whispered, Thank you for a day that did not break me. Thank you for a boy who smiles again. Thank you for strangers who feel less strange. Sleep came like a hand over her brow, gentle and sure. Night did not bring fear. It brought peace. And somewhere across town, in a house still wearing smoke, a man who had not slept well in years sat on the edge of his son's bed and listened to the sound of easy breathing. He matched his breath to the boy's. He did not pray aloud, but something like prayer rose in him anyway. He did not know the word for it, but he felt it, and in the guest-house window, the small lamp glowed on like a promise that did not need to be spoken yet to be true. Morning sunlight spilled into the hospital room like soft honey. The storm had passed 2 nights ago, leaving everything clean and still. Tasha sat at the small table beside her bed, sipping tea that Clarice had smuggled in from the hospital cafeteria. Real tea, not the watery kind the vending machine spat out. Her discharge papers lay folded neatly beside the cup. Eli was on the floor with crayons and a coloring book, humming to himself as he drew. He had made a picture of the mansion with little stick people standing in front. 1 tall man, 2 small boys, and a woman holding hands with both. Over the mansion he'd drawn a bright yellow sun and written in blocky letters, "Safe now." Tasha's throat tightened when she saw it. "Pretty good," she said. "You caught the roofline and everything." Eli grinned. "The dog's name is Max. I put him there too." "Max will be honored." She smoothed her hand over his hair. He had slept soundly the night before, for the first time since her rescue. But Tasha hadn't slept much. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Daniel's face, the mixture of pain and gratitude, the quiet way he'd said, "You saved my son. That wasn't something you forgot." A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. The door opened, and Daniel stepped inside. He looked more rested this morning. His sweater was dark grey, his hair still damp from a shower, and he carried a paper bag that smelled faintly of fresh bread. "Good morning," he said. "Morning," Tasha replied, standing carefully. "You didn't have to bring anything." He gave a small smile. "I couldn't come empty-handed." Eli's face lit up. "Did you bring more of that soup?" "Better," Daniel said, handing him a warm bag. "Apple fritters." Eli gasped like he'd been given a treasure. "From Mrs. Hattie?" "From her own kitchen. She said they're made to heal hearts." Eli bit into one, eyes closing. "It's working," he mumbled. Daniel chuckled quietly and turned back to Tasha. "Can we talk for a moment?" She gestured to the small table. "Of course." He sat across from her, resting his hands together. The air between them felt full of unspoken things. Tasha waited, letting him find his words. "I know I made you uncomfortable with my offer," he said finally. "I don't want to pressure you, but I also can't pretend I'm not serious." She met his eyes. "I know you mean well." "I do," he said. "But this isn't just about gratitude. Luke hasn't smiled like that in over a year. He hasn't slept through the night without nightmares since my wife passed. He did last night, for the first time." Tasha's chest softened. "That's good," she said quietly. He nodded. "It's more than good. It's hope. And I don't want that hope to vanish when you walk out of this hospital." Tasha glanced at Eli, who was too busy licking sugar from his fingers to listen. "You're asking for more than a caretaker," she said. "You're asking for someone to help you rebuild your family." Daniel didn't deny it. "Maybe I am." She looked down at her hands, at the thin hospital bracelet still around her wrist. "You don't even know me, Mr. Prescott." He leaned forward slightly. "I know you ran into a burning house for a child you'd never met. I know you work 2 jobs and still smile at people who don't deserve it. and I know my son looks at you like the sun came back." The words hit her heart like warm rain. She shook her head. "It's not that simple. I don't belong in that world of yours. The guest house, the estate. It's all too much. Maybe that's exactly what we need," he said softly. "Someone who's not from that world." Her pulse quickened. "And what happens when gossip starts? When people talk?" "Let them talk," he said simply. "I've learned I can't control people's stories, but I can decide which ones I live by." Tasha looked at him for a long time. His voice wasn't demanding. It was tired, honest. She could see the cracks in him, the places where grief had hollowed him out. Still, she hesitated. "I don't want my nephew to be treated like charity." "He won't be," Daniel said quickly. "He'll be treated like family." That word hung between them. Family, like a fragile thing made of glass. Eli wiped his fingers on a napkin and looked up. "I like their dog," he said. "And Luke likes space. We could be like cousin friends." Daniel smiled at that. "Cousin friends sounds good." Tasha sighed, rubbing her temples. "You two make it sound easy." "Sometimes it is," Daniel said gently. "Sometimes the hard thing is believing it can be that easy." She let out a shaky laugh. "You're persuasive, you know that?" "I run a company," he said. "I should be." Then softer. "But this isn't business, Tasha. This is life, and I don't want to get it wrong again." The sincerity in his eyes left her without words. Finally, she said, "I'll visit, just to see how Luke's doing. That's all I can promise right now." He smiled, small but genuine. "That's all I hoped for." He stood and extended his hand. She took it, expecting a firm, businesslike shake, but his grip was gentle, warm. "I'll send the driver at 3, he said. "If you change your mind, I'll understand." When he left, the room felt different. Not emptier, just quieter, as if the air itself was thinking. Eli looked at her. "Are we going to go?" She hesitated. "We'll see." "But I already drew us at their house," he said, pointing at the coloring book. Tasha smiled sadly. "You might have to draw a second picture just in case." By the afternoon, she found herself packing their few belongings into a tote bag. She told herself it was just for one visit, just to thank Mrs. Hattie for the meal and check on Luke's recovery. But deep down, she knew she was curious too. Curious about the man who spoke with such controlled sadness, and about what kind of world he lived in behind those mansion gates. When the black car pulled up outside the hospital, Eli's eyes went wide. "It's huge." "It's just a car," Tasha said, though she couldn't help but agree. The driver, an older man with silver hair and kind eyes, opened the door for them. "Mr. Prescott's waiting, Ma'am." "Thank you," Tasha said politely, helping Eli climb in. As they drove through Silverbrook, the landscape changed from small houses to long driveways and sprawling lawns. When the Prescott estate came into view, Eli's jaw dropped. "It's like a castle." The house, though scarred by fire, still stood proud. Parts of the roof were covered in tarps, and construction crews worked quietly in the distance. But even through its wounds, it was beautiful, a mix of stone and glass, with tall windows reflecting the afternoon light. Mrs. Hattie met them at the door, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. "Well, I'll be," she said, smiling wide. "You came." "I did," Tasha said. "And thank you for the fritters. They were heavenly." "Good medicine for tired souls," Hattie said with a wink. "Come in, honey. He's out back with Luke." They stepped through the kitchen into a bright sunroom that opened onto a wide porch. Daniel sat on the steps, watching Luke and Max play fetch. When he turned, his face broke into a soft smile. "You came," he said. Just for a little while, she replied. That's enough. Luke ran to them, holding a small ball. Miss Tasha, look, Max learned a new trick. Max bounded over, tail wagging, and dropped the ball at her feet. Impressive, she said, tossing it gently. The dog raced after it with joyful abandon. See? Luke beamed. He listens when you throw it too. Daniel rose from the steps, his voice quiet but sincere. Would you like a tour? Tasha hesitated, then nodded. All right. He led her through the main hall, pointing out where repairs were underway. The smell of fresh lumber mingled with faint traces of smoke. She noticed the framed photos lining the walls, Luke as a baby, a smiling woman with gentle eyes, and a younger Daniel laughing freely. She paused at one picture, the woman holding Luke on her lap, sunlight spilling through her hair. Your wife, she said softly. Yes, he said. His gaze lingered on the photo for a moment too long. Melissa. She was beautiful. She was, he said, voice low. She had a heart that could fill this house. I haven't quite managed to since she's been gone. Tasha wanted to say something comforting, but the weight of his grief was sacred, something that didn't need words. They walked in silence for a while. Finally, Daniel led her to the guest house. It was cozy, freshly painted, with curtains fluttering in the breeze. On the kitchen counter sat a vase of daisies and a small basket of fruit. I had the housekeeper set it up, Daniel said, for you to see. Not as pressure, just so you'd know what I meant. Tasha ran her hand over the wooden countertop. It felt smooth and warm. It's lovely. Eli peeked into one of the bedrooms and gasped. There's a window seat and books. Daniel smiled faintly. Luke wanted you to have that. Tasha turned to him, startled. He did? He said you'd like to read here at night. He told Mrs. Hattie to make it cozy. Her heart squeezed. He's a thoughtful boy. He takes after his rescuer. Daniel said quietly. She met his gaze, and for a long moment neither spoke. There was a pull there, gentle but undeniable, the kind that only forms between two people who have both lost something precious and are learning to live again. Finally, she broke the silence. I can't promise anything permanent. I have responsibilities. Work. I understand, he said. But if you decide to take this step, it'll be with full respect. No conditions, just a chance to build something better for all of us. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. I'll think about it. Take your time, he said. The door will stay open. By the time they left, the sun was setting behind the trees. The sky glowed in shades of rose and gold, and the world felt softer somehow. In the car, Eli leaned against her arm. Auntie? Yes? I think God wanted us to go there, he said sleepily. She brushed a curl from his forehead. You do? Yeah, he murmured. Luke needed you. And maybe his daddy did too. Tasha looked out the window at the fading mansion in the distance. Maybe we all need somebody, she whispered. And as the first stars appeared in the dusk, she felt something stir inside her, a small, trembling hope that maybe this wasn't just another job or act of kindness. Maybe it was the beginning of healing for all of them. A week later, the rhythm of ordinary life began to tug Tasha back. Only this time, nothing felt ordinary. The hospital had released her 2 days after the visit to the Prescott estate. Her lungs still felt tight when she climbed stairs, but she pushed through, determined to return to work. She couldn't afford more time off. Bills didn't rest, not even for heroes. The apartment smelled faintly of bleach and rain. It was a narrow 2-bedroom space above a pawn shop, with peeling wallpaper and an old radiator that clicked through the night. Eli had taped his "Safe Now" drawing to the fridge, right next to a crooked report card that read, Eli Reynolds, A in Reading. "You sure you're okay to go back?" Clarice asked as they rode the hospital elevator the next morning. She had insisted on picking Tasha up and driving her in, just in case. "I'll take it slow," Tasha said. "The bills won't wait for my lungs." Clarice gave her a side eye. "You're too stubborn for your own good." "God made me that way," Tasha said with a small grin. "Don't blame him for everything." Clarice shot back, laughing. The laughter helped. For a moment, it made the world feel manageable again. But as soon as Tasha clocked in at the nurse's station, she sensed something was off. Her supervisor, Mrs. Porter, stood with folded arms near the board, her lips pressed thin. "Tasha, can I speak with you?" she said, not unkindly, but tight-lipped. "Of course." They stepped into the small office. A calendar of sunsets hung on the wall, but the atmosphere was far from peaceful. "I'm afraid I have some difficult news," Mrs. Porter began. "The hospital is restructuring the evening shift staff. A few of our part-time positions are being reduced and—" She sighed, looking down. "You're among them." The words hit like cold water. "Reduced?" "I tried to fight it," Mrs. Porter said softly. "But administration's cutting hours. I can keep you on mornings for now, 20 hours a week, until we sort things out." 20 hours. Half her pay. Tasha nodded, forcing steadiness into her voice. "I understand. Thank you for trying." When she walked out of the office, her legs felt shaky. She sat on a bench in the hallway and stared at her badge. It gleamed faintly under the fluorescent lights, a small piece of her identity she'd clung to through the hardest years. Clarice found her a few minutes later. "What happened?" Tasha told her. Clarice's face darkened. "They cut your hours after what you just did?" "It's not about that," Tasha said quietly. "It's business. It's injustice is what it is." Clarice muttered. "You deserve more." "I'll manage," Tasha said, though her stomach twisted with uncertainty. That evening, she picked Eli up from school and took him for ice cream at the corner shop. She smiled through his chatter, pretending everything was fine. But when they got home, she found a note taped to their door. Notice of sale. The handwriting was neat, almost cheerful. The landlord had sold the building to a new owner, effective in 30 days. All leases would terminate. Tasha sank against the wall, the paper trembling in her hands. "Is it bad?" Eli asked, clutching his backpack straps. She swallowed. "We'll be fine, baby. God's just moving some pieces around." He nodded, trusting her completely, and that made it both easier and harder. That night, after Eli fell asleep, she sat at the kitchen table and stared at Daniel Prescott's card. It lay where she'd left it, between the Bible her grandmother had given her and a half-empty mug of tea. She traced the embossed letters with her fingertip. Daniel Prescott. The memory of his quiet, steady voice came back to her. Sometimes the hard thing is believing it can be that easy. She whispered into the stillness. "Lord, I'm tired of pretending I can carry it all myself. If this is the path, show me." The next morning, she made up her mind. The Prescott estate looked different in daylight, softer, less imposing. Workers moved along the driveway with quiet precision, repairing the burned section of the east wing. The guest house stood nestled among flowering shrubs, its porch glinting with dew. Daniel was already waiting outside when Tasha's car pulled up. He stood in rolled-up sleeves and jeans, coffee in hand. When he saw them, his expression brightened with something that looked almost like relief. "You came," he said, walking toward her. Tasha smiled faintly. "Seems like God closed a few doors and left this one open." "I'm glad you walked through it," he said. "Welcome home." She hesitated at that word. Home feels like a strong word. Then we'll make it earn its meaning, he said. Luke came running out from behind the house, Max bounding beside him. "Miss Tasha," he shouted, "you came back!" He threw his arms around her waist before she could reply. She laughed and hugged him tight. "I told you I would." Eli giggled as Max licked his hand. "He remembers me." "Dogs remember hearts," Hattie said, appearing in the doorway with a dish towel over her shoulder. "And yours are good ones." Daniel gestured toward the guest house. "Come see it again. I made sure everything was ready." Inside, sunlight filtered through clean curtains. The faint scent of lemon and soap lingered. On the kitchen counter sat a basket of fresh fruit and 2 handwritten notes. One in Hattie's careful script, another in a child's. "Welcome home, Miss Tasha and Eli." Luke Eli read it aloud, beaming. "He wrote our names." Tasha's eyes stung. "He sure did." They unpacked through the morning. It didn't take long. Tasha owned little beyond clothes, a few books, and keepsakes. She placed her grandmother's Bible on the nightstand and Eli's drawings on the fridge. The guest house soon felt like theirs, not because of what it looked like, but because of how it felt. At lunchtime, Daniel knocked softly on the door. "Mind if I join you for a minute?" "Of course," Tasha said, motioning him inside. He stood awkwardly at first, hands in his pockets. "I wanted to give you this," he said, handing her a folder. Inside were printed papers. "What's this?" "Employment contract," he said. "Outlined terms, salary, hours, vacation days. It's official, but flexible. You're not my servant, Tasha. You're my partner in Luke's care." She flipped through the pages. The pay was fair, more than she'd ever made before. "You didn't have to make it this generous." "I did," he said quietly. "Generosity is overdue in this house." She met his gaze. "Thank you." He nodded, then looked toward the window, where Eli and Luke played catch with Max. "They look happy." "They are," she said. "Kids don't need much, just safety, kindness, and someone to believe in them." He looked back at her, something thoughtful in his eyes. "And adults?" She smiled softly. "We need the same thing. We just forget it's allowed." A silence stretched between them, easy and warm. Then Daniel said, "Would you like to join us for dinner tonight? Nothing fancy, just spaghetti and bad salad." "Bad salad?" She laughed. "I made it myself," he said dryly. "All right," she said, "but I'll bring dessert." That evening, the guest house filled with the smell of brownies. Eli licked the spoon while Tasha folded the still-warm dessert into a cloth-lined basket. "Do rich people like brownies?" he asked. "Everyone likes brownies," she said, laughing. "They just don't always admit it." When they arrived at the main house, Hattie had already set the table. The kitchen glowed with lamplight and laughter. Luke talked animatedly about his science project, and Daniel listened with a patient smile. "Your dad's pretty good at this," Tasha said quietly. "He's trying," Luke whispered. "You help him." Her heart fluttered at that. Dinner was simple but perfect. They ate, talked, and laughed until the plates were empty. When dessert came out, even Daniel smiled like a child. "Best bad salad redemption I've ever had," he said. Afterward, the boys played with Max in the yard while the adults lingered at the table. "I was thinking," Daniel began slowly, "about adding a routine for Luke. Morning walks, light chores, something steady. He's been lost since the fire." "That's a good idea," Tasha said. "Structure heals." He nodded. "You're good at this." "It's just what I've learned," she said. "When you've lost something big, the small things matter most." They sat in comfortable quiet for a while, listening to the distant laughter of the boys. Finally, Daniel said, You don't have to stay forever. I know that. But I want you to know. You belong here for as long as you need." Tasha looked out at the twilight, her heart full and aching at once. "Thank you, Daniel." "For what?" "For letting light in again," she said. That night, after putting Eli to bed, she stepped outside onto the porch. Fireflies blinked across the garden, their glow soft and magical. She wrapped her arms around herself and breathed in the scent of rain on grass. Inside the main house, she could see Daniel through a window, tucking Luke into bed. He leaned down, kissed his son's forehead, and turned off the light. When he looked out the window and saw her, he gave a small nod. She returned it with a gentle smile before stepping back inside. For the first time in years, Tasha felt something stir in her chest that she hadn't dared to feel. Hope. Not the fragile kind that came and went, but the sturdy kind that could weather storms. She whispered into the quiet, "Thank you, Lord, for second chances." The morning air carried the smell of new beginnings, wet grass, coffee brewing, and the distant echo of hammers from the East Wing repairs. Tasha stood in the doorway of the guest house, her hands resting on the wooden frame, watching the mist lift from the yard. For the first time in months, she didn't have to rush anywhere. No hospital clock-in, no landlord's knocks, no wondering if she could stretch one more paycheck to cover everything. It was moving day, but it already felt like arriving. Inside, Eli darted between boxes, his little voice full of excitement. "Auntie, look! There's a closet just for shoes." "Then I hope you plan on getting some that don't talk back," she teased, holding up his worn sneakers. He giggled. "They don't talk, they squeak." Daniel's truck pulled up the drive just then, dust trailing behind. He stepped out, wearing jeans and a plaid shirt rolled to his elbows, carrying a toolbox and a small pot of flowers. "I thought you might want something for your porch," he said. Tasha smiled, taking the flowers. "Petunias. My grandmother used to grow these." "I didn't know," he said softly. "I just picked something bright." "Well," she said, setting them on the railing, "you guessed right." Mrs. Hattie came around the side of the house, carrying a basket of towels. "Morning, sugar. Thought you might want fresh linens. Guest house might be new, but comfort takes a woman's touch." "Thank you," Tasha said. "I'll wash them and bring them back later." "Now don't you dare," Hattie scolded kindly. "Your only job today is making this house yours." Luke and Eli ran past, laughing, Max bounding behind them with a stick too big for his mouth. The sound of their laughter filled the air, light, pure, alive. Daniel watched them a long time before saying quietly, "That sound's been missing for a while." Tasha followed his gaze. "Children remind us what joy sounds like." He nodded. "I'd forgotten." They shared a quiet moment before Daniel spoke again. "I'll be in town most of the day, checking on the contractor. If you need anything, Hattie's right next door." "We'll be fine," Tasha said. "Go handle your business." He smiled faintly. "I'm starting to think this is my business now." By noon, the guest house felt alive. Curtains hung, books shelved. The smell of cornbread drifted through open windows. Eli had claimed the smaller bedroom, proudly hanging his drawings along the wall with tape. "Do you think Luke will like my pictures?" he asked. "He'll love them," she said. "I can draw one for him, too." "That'd be kind," Tasha said, slicing tomatoes for lunch. "He could use more smiles." They ate on the porch steps, feet swinging, Max curled beside them. From the distance came the low rumble of thunder, not the angry kind, just the sleepy muttering of a late summer storm. Eli licked jam from his fingers. "Do you think rich people pray before lunch?" Tasha chuckled. "Depends which ones, but we do." She bowed her head, and he followed. "Lord, thank you for this food. for roofs that don't leak and hearts that do, so love can get in. Amen. Eli opened one eye. You made that up, didn't you? Maybe, she said, smiling. But it still counts. That afternoon, Daniel returned earlier than expected, carrying a rolled-up blueprint. The contractor wanted you to see this, he said. Luke's room redesign. He asked for your input. Mine? She asked, surprised. His words were, Miss Tasha knows how to make rooms feel safe. She felt a warmth rise in her chest. All right, then. Let's see. They spread the blueprint across the table. Daniel pointed to a window wall. He wants to paint this blue. I think it's too dark. Maybe lighter, she suggested. Sky blue makes mornings gentle. He nodded, jotting a note. You have an eye for calm. I've had to learn, she said. Peace doesn't come easy. It's something you make. He looked up at her. And you do it well. Their eyes met and lingered, long enough for both to feel it, the beginning of something fragile and good. But before either could say more, Luke burst through the door, holding a jar of lightning bugs. Miss Tasha, look, he exclaimed. They glow even in the day. She bent down, peering into the jar. They're just showing off for you. Daniel smiled faintly. You've been busy, buddy. Can I keep them in my room? Luke asked. For tonight, Daniel said. Then we'll set them free. Fair? Luke nodded. Fair. He ran back out, Max on his heels, shouting, Come on, Eli! The sound faded into the trees, leaving the two adults alone again. You're good with him, Daniel said softly. He's different since you came. I think he just needed to be seen. Tasha replied. We all do. Daniel exhaled slowly. You make everything sound simple. Simple doesn't mean easy, she said. He smiled. No, it doesn't. Later that evening, a light rain began to fall. Luke and Eli sat on the porch steps, wrapped in one blanket, watching the drops dance on the garden. Max snored beside them. Do you miss your old home? Luke asked quietly. Eli thought for a moment. Sometimes. But Auntie says home isn't a place. It's where people love you. Luke nodded. I like that. Inside, Tasha washed the last dish and glanced out the window at the two boys. They looked small and peaceful, like something out of a dream she hadn't known she'd wanted. Daniel entered quietly, setting his phone on the counter. The boys? Talking about love, she said with a smile. He leaned against the counter, watching them through the glass. They're making their own world out there. That's what children do, she said softly. They rebuild where adults break. He studied her a long time, his voice lower when he spoke. You really believe that? I have to, she said. It's how I keep my faith. He nodded slowly, and something in his expression, respect, admiration, maybe even awe, settled the air between them. That night, thunder rolled softly in the distance. Tasha tucked Eli into bed, brushed the hair from his forehead, and whispered a prayer. Across the yard, a single light glowed in Luke's room. As she stepped onto the porch, she saw Daniel standing in the rain, looking up at the repaired roof. You'll catch cold, she called. He smiled faintly. Just making sure it holds. She grabbed an umbrella and joined him. The rain pattered softly on the fabric above them. It's holding, she said. He nodded, eyes on the dark sky. After the fire, I didn't think I'd ever see this place in one piece again. Maybe it was never about the house, she said. Maybe it was about the people who'd walk back into it. He turned to her, and for a heartbeat, neither spoke. Then he said, quietly, You ever get the feeling God sends certain people to you right when you stop believing he still might? She met his gaze, rain streaking down her face. All the time. They stood there under the same umbrella, the storm whispering around them, both quietly knowing something sacred was beginning, but too humble to name it yet. The next morning dawned bright and golden. Luke and Eli burst into the kitchen, hungry and laughing, while Hattie hummed over a skillet of pancakes. Daniel entered last, his shirt untucked, his eyes lighter than before. "Morning," he said. "Morning," Tasha echoed, smiling. The house felt alive again, like sunlight finally remembered where to land. The Prescott estate had once been quiet in the way an empty church is quiet, echoes without life. But now, laughter floated through its halls again. Pots clanged in the kitchen. The piano in the parlor, untouched for years, sang soft hymns on Sunday afternoons when Tasha's fingers danced across the keys. Morning sunlight poured through wide windows, spilling warmth over breakfast tables and hardwood floors. Luke and Eli, once shy around each other, had become inseparable. They raced down hallways, built forts out of couch cushions, and whispered secret plans about exploring the woods behind the house. Tasha often stood in the doorway watching them, her heart swelling. She still woke early out of habit, old nurses' hours, but instead of hospital beeps, she woke to birdsong. She made coffee, read a psalm, and felt peace where once there had been only exhaustion. Daniel noticed it too. He noticed everything these days: the smell of coffee, the sound of Luke's laughter, the way Tasha hummed when she cooked. She had a way of bringing warmth to rooms that had grown cold from silence. One morning, Daniel found her in the kitchen humming softly, sleeves rolled up, whisking pancake batter. Flour dusted her cheek. "Morning," he said from the doorway. "Morning," she replied, glancing back with a small smile. "You're up early." "Old habits," he said. "Couldn't sleep." "Bad dreams?" He hesitated, then nodded. "They come and go." Tasha poured a circle of batter into the skillet. "Dreams don't like silence. You should talk about them." He raised a brow. "You say that like it's easy." "It's not," she said gently, "but it helps." He leaned against the counter. "You talk about yours?" "Sometimes," she said. "Mostly to God. He's a good listener." Daniel smiled faintly. "Does he talk back?" "All the time," she said, "but not in words, more like peace that makes no sense." He studied her quietly, something thoughtful flickering behind his eyes. The sound of small footsteps interrupted them. Eli stumbled in, hair wild, dragging his blanket. "Morning," he mumbled. "Morning, sleepyhead," Tasha said, setting a pancake on his plate. Luke followed a moment later, clutching his stuffed bear. "Max stole my sock again," he said indignantly. Daniel chuckled. "He's probably teaching it manners." Breakfast became a cheerful chaos: pancakes, syrup, laughter, and a golden retriever begging under the table. Afterward, Daniel offered to drive the boys to school. Tasha hesitated, but he insisted. "You've been doing enough. Let me be part of this." When they left, she stood on the porch watching the truck disappear down the driveway. She realized she was smiling. The days settled into a gentle rhythm. Mornings were filled with chores, afternoons with homework and laughter, evenings with dinners that grew into conversations about faith, family, and forgiveness. Tasha discovered Luke's love for stars. He would spend hours drawing constellations on scraps of paper, naming his own. "This one's called the Hero Lady," he told her one night. "Oh," she asked. "What does she do?" "She runs into fire and saves people," he said simply. "Like you." Her throat caught. "That's a good constellation." He nodded solemnly. "It's my favorite." Daniel found himself watching her more often than he meant to. He noticed how she comforted Luke after nightmares, How she knelt in the garden teaching Eli to plant beans. How she smiled even when she thought no one was looking. For the first time since Melissa's death, he started leaving his office door open. Sometimes, when Tasha passed by, he'd catch himself smiling. One afternoon, while she hung laundry in the yard, he walked over, sleeves rolled, dirt under his nails from the garden project he'd started with Luke. "You shouldn't have to do this alone," he said, taking a sheet from her hands. "I don't mind," she said. "There's peace in work." "Still," he said, clipping a corner of the sheet to the line. "You deserve help." "Then help me hang this side," she said, laughing. He did, though his attempt was clumsy. When the sheet billowed in the wind, they both laughed, a sound so bright it startled them. For a moment their hands brushed. The touch was fleeting but warm, leaving something unspoken between them. Tasha looked away first. "You're not bad at this," she said lightly. "I'm learning," he replied. "You're a good teacher." That Sunday, Luke asked to go to church again. Daniel hesitated. He hadn't set foot inside a sanctuary since Melissa's funeral. But Tasha smiled and said, "Maybe God's been waiting for you to come back." So he went. The little white church sat at the edge of town, its bell ringing softly in the morning air. The congregation whispered when Daniel walked in, Silverbrook's reclusive billionaire, back in church. But Tasha stood beside him without flinching. Pastor Grant greeted them warmly. "Good to see you again, son." Daniel nodded. "It's been a while." The service was simple: hymns, prayer, and a sermon about forgiveness. Tasha sang beside Luke and Eli, her voice clear and tender. Daniel didn't sing, but he listened. He listened harder than he had in years. When the pastor said, "Sometimes we lose what we love most so we can remember who we belong to," Daniel felt something deep in his chest begin to stir, a painful, necessary awakening. After the service, he stood outside under the oak trees. "I forgot how this feels," he said quietly. "What's that?" Tasha asked. "Peace," he said. She smiled. "It's always been there. Sometimes it just waits until we're ready to notice it." That evening, back at the house, Daniel found an old photo album in a drawer. Pictures of Luke as a baby, of Melissa smiling at a picnic, of birthdays and Christmas mornings. He sat for a long time staring at one photo in particular, Melissa holding Luke, laughing, sunlight in her hair. When Tasha found him there, she didn't speak. She simply sat beside him. "I used to think I killed her," he said quietly. "You didn't," she said. "She was driving to see me that night," he said, voice trembling. "We'd fought. I told her I needed space. She left angry. The crash happened 15 minutes later." Tasha's hand found his. "You didn't make her die, Daniel. You just made her human. We all hurt people without meaning to. That's why grace exists." He looked at her, eyes wet. "I haven't known grace in a long time." "You're learning again," she said softly. They sat in silence, hands still joined, the weight between them no longer heavy. Just honest. Over the next few weeks, healing became habit. Luke laughed more. Daniel smiled easier. The guest house porch became a favorite place for evening tea and long talks. Hattie, ever the motherly guardian, pretended not to notice the closeness forming, though she often muttered prayers of gratitude while kneading dough. One night, as a gentle rain tapped against the windows, Daniel stood at the doorway of the guest house. "I brought something," he said. He held out a small box. Inside was a silver necklace, a simple cross pendant. "I found it while cleaning the attic," he said. "It was Melissa's. She'd want it with someone who believes the way you do." Tasha hesitated. "I can't take this." "It's a gift," he said softly. "No strings." She looked into his eyes and saw sincerity there. No pity, no debt, just gratitude. She took it carefully, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then I'll wear it and remember to pray for you both. That's all I ask," he said. As he turned to leave, she touched the pendant, feeling its cool weight against her heart. She whispered to herself, "Maybe this is what grace looks like." The next morning, sunlight poured through the curtains. Luke and Eli were already outside, chasing butterflies in the tall grass. Max barked joyfully, the sound echoing through the valley. Tasha stepped out onto the porch, her coffee warm in her hands. She could see Daniel by the garden, kneeling in the soil, planting new roses. He looked up and waved, and she waved back. For the first time since the fire, the Prescott home no longer felt haunted. It felt alive. Sunday came with golden light spilling through the guesthouse windows. The air felt crisp, clean, the kind of morning that made everything seem possible again. Luke's excited voice echoed down the hallway. "Are we going to church today?" Tasha smiled as she tied her scarf. "Yes, sweetheart. We'll leave after breakfast." Daniel appeared in the doorway, dressed simply in a navy shirt and pressed slacks. He looked uncertain, like a man visiting an old memory. "It's been a long time," he admitted quietly. "Then it's about time," Tasha said, her smile steady. They rode into town together. The church bell rang as they arrived, the sound soft and welcoming. People turned when they saw Daniel, Silverbrooks, most private man, walking in with the woman who'd saved his son. Whispers fluttered through the pews, but Tasha held her head high. Pastor Grant greeted them warmly at the door. "Good to see you back, Daniel." Daniel nodded. "I guess I'm overdue." Inside, the small sanctuary smelled of cedar and candle wax. Sunlight streamed through stained glass, painting colors across the wooden floor. Luke and Eli sat between Tasha and Daniel, their hands folded, eyes wide. The service began with a hymn. Tasha's voice blended with the congregation's. Sweet, clear, steady. Daniel didn't sing, but he listened like a man who'd forgotten how and was learning again. When the pastor spoke about grace, about how sometimes God rebuilds what life burns down, Daniel's gaze found hers. She smiled softly, a wordless amen. After the benediction, curious eyes followed them outside. A few townsfolk approached with polite greetings, but one woman whispered too loudly, "That's her, the nurse living with him." Daniel heard it, saw Tasha's shoulders stiffen, and stepped closer. "She's my friend," he said firmly, "and she saved my family." The whispering stopped. They walked to the car in silence until Luke said, "Daddy, are people mad at Miss Tasha?" Daniel shook his head. "No, son. Sometimes people just don't understand goodness when they see it." Tasha looked out the window as they drove home, quiet tears slipping down her cheek. Daniel noticed his voice low and sincere. "Let them talk, Tasha. We know the truth." She nodded. "I'm not ashamed. I just wish kindness didn't need defending." He smiled gently. "Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it just needs living." And as the church bell tolled behind them, echoing across the hills, Tasha realized he was right. Faith wasn't proved by words, but by love that kept showing up, no matter who whispered. Life at the Prescott estate soon settled into a quiet, comforting rhythm. Mornings began with sunlight streaming through open windows and the smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen. Luke and Eli rushed through breakfast to play in the yard, their laughter carrying across the garden like music. Tasha found peace in the small things, folding fresh laundry, helping Luke with schoolwork, baking bread on rainy afternoons. Daniel often joined them, rolling up his sleeves to help with chores he'd once left to staff. She saw the change in him, his smile coming easier, his voice softer when he spoke. One evening, Daniel found her planting herbs outside the guest house. "You've got a green thumb," he said, crouching beside her. "Maybe," she replied, "but it's the soil that does most of the work." He smiled, realizing she wasn't talking about gardening. "You're good for this place, Tasha, for all of us." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, something warm, fragile, and real. But in town, whispers began to spread. People talked about the widow nurse living with the billionaire, about how quickly she'd become part of his home. The gossip grew quietly, like weeds after rain. When Tasha heard a remark at the market, a woman murmuring, "No one saves a man's child without wanting something," she simply bowed her head and said nothing. That night, she prayed longer than usual. "Lord," she whispered, "give me strength to live kindly, even when kindness is misunderstood." And as she watched the boys asleep, the moonlight resting gently on their faces, she knew she'd made the right choice. Love wasn't proven by what others saw. It was shown in the quiet, faithful things no one could take away. Rain drummed softly against the windows that evening, filling the house with a gentle rhythm. Tasha sat by the fire, reading while the boys built a small fort out of blankets. Daniel entered quietly, a mug of coffee in his hand, his expression thoughtful. "They're good for each other," he said, nodding towards the boys. "They are," she replied. "They remind us what joy looks like." He sat across from her, the firelight flickering over his face. "I've been thinking," he began slowly, "about how much has changed since you came here. It's strange, how peace can sneak up on you." Tasha smiled softly. "Peace likes humble doors." Daniel looked down at his hands. "I never told you this, but I stopped believing in God after Melissa died. I thought faith was just something people said to make loss feel smaller." She set her book aside. "And now?" He hesitated, eyes glistening. "Now, I see my son laughing again. I hear music in this house. I think maybe God didn't leave. Maybe I did." Tasha's heart ached with compassion. "He never leaves, Daniel. We just forget to look for him in the smoke." He nodded slowly, voice barely a whisper. "I don't deserve this second chance." "None of us do," she said gently. "That's why it's called grace." They sat in silence, the fire crackling between them. Outside, thunder rolled faintly, but inside, everything felt still. Daniel looked up finally, his eyes meeting hers. "Thank you for bringing life back here." Tasha smiled through tears. "I just followed the light, Daniel. You're the one keeping it burning." And for the first time in years, he truly believed her. The peace didn't last. It never did for long in a small town where whispers traveled faster than light. It began with a photograph, Tasha and Daniel standing side by side after church, sunlight falling through the trees, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. Someone snapped it, posted it online with a cruel caption, "The nurse who moved in with Silverbrook's richest widower." By afternoon, the story spread through town. People stopped talking when Tasha entered the grocery store. At the cafe, 2 women whispered, "I heard she's after his money." Someone else said, "Poor, Melissa barely gone, and he's already replaced her." When Daniel found out, anger flashed in his eyes, followed by shame. "I should have protected you from this," he said. "It's not your fault." Tasha replied, though her voice shook. "But it hurts." Luke overheard them that evening, his small face worried. "Are people mad at Miss Tasha?" Daniel knelt beside him. "They're wrong, son. She's the best thing that's happened to us." But words couldn't stop rumors. Within days, Daniel's late wife's sister, Sandra, called. her tone sharp as glass. "You're ruining my sister's memory, Daniel. Letting her move in? It's indecent." Daniel hung up, jaw tight. That night he barely spoke at dinner. The house felt tense again, the way it had after the fire, warm rooms gone cold. Later, Tasha packed a small bag, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. She told herself it was temporary, but her heart knew better. As she stepped out into the rain, Daniel's voice broke the silence. "Please don't go," he said. She turned, trembling. Sometimes love's hardest test is staying kind when the world turns cruel. Then she walked into the storm, and everything began to unravel. The rain came like judgment that night, cold, unrelenting, and wild. The wind howled through the trees, bending the branches until they cracked like old bones. Inside the Prescott estate, the fire in the hearth burned low, its glow trembling across the walls. Luke stood at the window, watching the storm, his small hands pressed against the glass. "She's really gone, isn't she?" he whispered. Daniel knelt beside him, heart breaking. "She just needs time, son." Luke shook his head, tears spilling down his cheeks. "No, she left because people were mean, because I told her you loved her, and now she's sad." Daniel's chest tightened. "You told her that?" Luke nodded, sobbing. "I said you smile when she's here. I thought it would help." Daniel pulled him close, but the boy trembled harder. "I didn't mean to make her go," Luke cried. "I just wanted her to stay forever." Daniel's hand stilled. The storm outside roared louder, thunder rolling like a drumbeat. And in that moment, he knew. If he didn't find her tonight, he might lose her for good. "Stay with Mrs. Hattie," he said quickly, grabbing his coat. "I'm going to bring her home." Luke looked up, eyes wide with fear. "But it's dark." Daniel knelt, meeting his gaze. "So was I before she came." Then he was gone. The storm battered him as he drove down the winding roads, wipers struggling against sheets of rain. The radio hissed, lightning flashing across the fields. He thought of Tasha, her laugh, her faith, the way she made the broken house feel alive again. When he reached the crossroads leading out of town, he spotted her car pulled to the side, hazard lights blinking weakly through the downpour. "Tasha!" he shouted as he jumped out, rain drenching him instantly. She stood by the guardrail, soaked and shaking, trying to change a flat tire. "Daniel?" Her voice trembled. "What are you doing out here?" "Looking for you," he said, stepping closer. "You shouldn't be alone." Tears mixed with rain on her cheeks. "People are talking, Daniel. I didn't want to bring more shame to you or Luke." He shook his head fiercely. "Shame? You brought life. You brought faith back into this place. Let them talk. They don't get to write our story." Lightning flashed, illuminating their faces, his eyes raw with sincerity, hers full of disbelief and love she'd tried to bury. "Please," he said, reaching for her hand. "Come home." She hesitated only a second before nodding. "All right." He smiled through the storm, relief flooding him. "Let's go home." As they drove back, the wind began to soften, the thunder fading into distant rumbles. When they reached the estate, Luke burst from the doorway, barefoot, calling her name. Tasha knelt and gathered him into her arms. "I told you I'd come back," she whispered. Daniel stood behind them, rain dripping from his hair, his heart lighter than it had been in years. Outside, the storm broke apart, and for the first time, stars began to pierce through the clouds. Morning came quietly, as if the storm had washed the world clean. The clouds were gone, the sky a clear, forgiving blue. Tasha woke to the sound of birds outside the window and the faint smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen. For a moment, she didn't move, just lay there, wrapped in warmth, letting the peace soak into her heart. When she walked out into the hallway, she found Daniel sitting at the table, hair still damp, a newspaper folded beside him. He looked up, a hesitant smile on his lips. "You stayed." "I did," she said softly. "And thank you for coming for me. I should have come sooner," he said, standing. "You shouldn't have had to face that alone." Before she could respond, Luke rushed in and threw his arms around her waist. "I knew you'd come back," he cried. "I prayed you would." Tasha laughed through her tears. "You've got some strong prayers, little man." That afternoon, Daniel made a decision. He was done letting rumors speak for him. He called the local paper and arranged a statement. When the reporter arrived, he met her on the porch, calm and steady. "I'd like to make something clear," he said. "The woman who saved my son isn't a scandal. She's our blessing. She's family." The next day, his words were printed for everyone to see. "Daniel Prescott defends nurse who saved his son. She gave us back our faith." At church the following Sunday, people who once whispered now smiled and nodded. Even Sandra sent a letter, short, stiff, but enough to say she was sorry. "You've made him happy again," it read. That evening, Daniel found Tasha on the porch, watching the boys chase fireflies. "You changed everything," he said quietly. She shook her head. "No, Daniel, you just remembered who you were." He stepped closer, his voice low and full of feeling. "Then maybe I needed someone brave enough to remind me." For a long moment they stood there. No rumors, no doubts, just the steady hum of grace between them. Luke's laughter rang through the yard, and Tasha looked up at the stars breaking through the twilight. "Funny," she said softly. "The same fire that burned this house nearly broke us, but it also brought us here." Daniel reached for her hand. "Sometimes God lets things fall apart," he said, "so we can build them better." She smiled through tears, fingers lacing with his. "And this time, we build on love." The house glowed behind them, windows warm with light. For the first time, the Prescott home felt whole, not because it was repaired, but because the people inside it finally were. Summer melted into fall, and with it came a gentler rhythm to life at the Prescott estate. The fire-scarred roof was long repaired, new roses bloomed along the garden path, and laughter had taken root in every corner of the house. The pain that once lived within those walls had softened, replaced by something steady, something like grace. Every morning, Tasha brewed coffee while Daniel read the paper, half listening to the sound of Luke and Eli chasing Max across the yard. Their friendship had become as strong as brothers. Sometimes they would build forts under the oaks, and other times they'd sneak cookies from the kitchen, giggling when Mrs. Hattie pretended not to notice. The housekeeper often said the boys were God's proof that laughter heals faster than medicine. And Daniel, once the man who lived behind closed doors, was now the one teaching them how to fly kites and fix birdhouses. Tasha watched him one crisp afternoon from the porch, sleeves rolled, laughter unguarded as Luke's kite lifted high into the wind. It had been months since she'd seen that shadow of grief in his eyes. "He's coming back to life," she murmured. Hattie smiled beside her. "Maybe he already has, and maybe, Sugar, you're the reason." Tasha blushed. "I just helped him remember what he already had." "Faith?" Hattie asked. "Love," Tasha said softly. "Faith was just how we found it." Later that week, the town held its annual harvest fair. Tasha, Daniel, and the boys went together, laughing as they walked through rows of caramel apples and pumpkin pies. The same townsfolk who once whispered now smiled and waved. Redemption, it seemed, had a way of traveling just as fast as gossip. When Daniel won her a stuffed bear at the ring toss, Tasha laughed until she cried. "You cheated," she teased. He grinned. "I finally learned to aim for what matters. That night, they rode the Ferris wheel, the boys in the seat ahead of them, pointing out constellations. Luke looked back and shouted, "There's the Hero Lady star, Miss Tasha!" Daniel glanced at her. "Hero Lady, huh?" She laughed, eyes shining. "I told him stories about light that never quits." "Seems he learned that from you," Daniel said quietly. They rode in silence for a moment, the world below washed in golden lights. "You ever think," he asked softly, "that maybe the fire wasn't punishment, but a beginning?" Tasha looked at him, her voice tender. "I think God lets certain things burn so he can show us what can't be destroyed." When the ride stopped, Daniel reached for her hand as they stepped down. This time, she didn't pull away. As autumn deepened, the foundation Daniel created, the Melissa and Hope Fund, began helping families who had lost homes to fires or hardship. Tasha volunteered at every event, speaking softly to mothers who came in with trembling hands. "You're not alone," she would tell them. "I've seen what comes after the ashes." Daniel would watch her from across the room, his heart full. Every day she reminded him that grace wasn't loud. It was patient, quiet, and unstoppable. One evening, as the first snow began to fall, Tasha found Daniel on the porch, coat dusted white, staring up at the sky. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "So are you," he said simply. The snow fell thicker, soft and endless, blanketing the world in peace. Inside, the boys laughed by the fire, their voices a melody that promised tomorrow would be kind. And for the first time in years, Daniel realized, his home wasn't just rebuilt. It was reborn. 6 months later, spring came early to Silverbrook. The hills around the Prescott estate were bright with wildflowers, and the air carried the scent of rain and promise. The house, once marked by fire, now stood whole again, its windows shining, its halls full of life. Inside, laughter echoed as family and friends gathered for Luke's birthday celebration. Tasha moved through the kitchen with easy grace, balancing trays of cookies and lemonade. Eli helped her, proudly wearing a paper party hat. "I told Luke he's getting older, but I'm still faster," he said with a grin. "Careful, you might hurt his feelings," she teased, handing him a tray. Music floated from the living room. Mrs. Hattie was leading a few guests in song, and even Pastor Grant had joined in. Daniel moved among them, greeting everyone with the warm ease of a man no longer burdened by guilt. Every now and then, his eyes sought Tasha's, and when they met, the world seemed to quiet around them. Luke burst into the kitchen, holding a gift bag and smiling ear to ear. "Miss Tasha, Daddy said we're about to do cake. Come on." She followed him to the dining room, where a large chocolate cake waited, glowing with candles. As everyone sang, Daniel stood behind Luke, his hand resting on his son's shoulder, his gaze filled with gratitude. When Luke blew out the candles, he turned and hugged both Tasha and Daniel at once. "I made a wish," he whispered. "What kind of wish?" Daniel asked, smiling. Luke grinned. "I can't tell, or it won't come true, but it already is." Laughter filled the room again, warm and full. When the guests began to drift outside for games and music, Daniel touched Tasha's arm gently. "Walk with me?" She nodded, heart fluttering. They stepped onto the garden path, the air cool and golden with late afternoon light. Birds called from the trees, and the sound of the boys' laughter drifted from the yard. Daniel stopped beneath the same oak where they'd first talked months before, the one that had survived the fire. "I used to think the fire ruined my life," he began softly. "But now I see it brought me back to it." Tasha smiled faintly. "God rebuilds what ashes hide." He took a breath, pulling something from his pocket, a small velvet box. Her breath caught as he opened it. Inside was a simple gold ring, its design delicate and timeless. "Tasha," he said, voice trembling slightly. "You saved my son, but you also saved me. You taught me how to live again, how to love again. I don't want another day to pass without you by my side. Will you marry me?" Tasha's eyes filled with tears. "Daniel, are you sure?" He smiled. "I've never been more sure of anything." Luke and Eli came running up the path, breathless from play. "Daddy, did you ask her?" Luke shouted. Daniel laughed. "I did, son." Tasha knelt and hugged both boys, tears spilling freely now. "Well then," she whispered, "how could I ever say no?" The boys cheered, Max barked, and Mrs. Hattie called from the porch. "I knew it! I told Pastor Grant to keep his calendar open." Everyone gathered beneath the oak as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold and rose. Daniel slipped the ring on her finger, and the crowd clapped, their joy echoing through the valley. Tasha looked up at Daniel, eyes shining. "I guess the fire wasn't the end after all." He smiled, voice thick with emotion. "No, love, it was the beginning." And as twilight settled over Silverbrook, the Prescott house stood glowing in the distance. A house once touched by flame, now burning bright with faith, family, and forever love. Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.